everybody, welcome to Arabella's Reading Corner. I'm Arabella and today we will be reading Extra Yarn. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soup from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. This is the little town, then that's Annabelle, and then that's the box with yarn of every color. So she went home and knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too, but there was still extra yarn. Okay, so that's her sweater that she knit for herself. And then that's Mars, her dog. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. So that's Nate and his dog. But it turned out he was. So it turned out Nate was jealous. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. Okay, so that's Nate and his sweater and his dog's sweater. And then that's a long yarn leash. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone, Annabelle. That sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." So that's Mr. Norman. He looks a bit grumpy. But it turned out she could, and she did, even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So that's everyone in her class and Mr. Norman, and they all have knit sweaters. How could she possibly have that much extra yarn? So she knit sweaters for her mom and her dad, and for Mr. Pendleton, and for Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louise. So that's her mom and her dad. That's Mr. and Mrs. Pendleton, and then that is Dr. Palmer. And then that's little Louise. She made sweaters for everyone except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. Oh my goodness, he must be freezing. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat. And even then, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So that's Mr. Crabtree. That's him in the snow. Oh my goodness. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats and for other animals too. People thought, soon Annabelle will run out of yarn. But it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Okay, so that's a lot of animals wearing sweaters, a mailbox wearing a sweater, a birdhouse wearing a sweater, and a bird wearing a sweater, and a house wearing a sweater. Whew. Things began to change in that little town. She knit a sweater for all of that houses in town. Next, she'll make some sweaters for their trees. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Arabella. So that's a lot of people lining up to see Arabella. Then that's the archduke. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I am willing to offer you $1 million. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The archduke mustache twitched. $2 million, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." $10 million, shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. She is stubborn. $10 million. She must be very fond of that box of yarn. So that night, the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box and took it to the archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea. Okay, so it's nighttime, and that's the 3 robbers' ship. Back to his castle. The archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box and he lifted its lid and he looked inside. Uh-oh, I wonder what's in that box. Is it gonna be the yarn? His mustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. The archduke hurled the box out of the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." The box was empty. There was no yarn in it. Wow. So he threw the box out the window. But it landed on a glacier. Okay, so now it's sailing across the sea. She finds the box. It turned out she was. Oh, she did make a sweater for a tree. I hope you enjoyed this book.